And we've got a very, very special guest today, Amit Connor. And Amit is an author and podcaster. You might know Amit from the Resolving Reality podcast. Very, very interesting podcast. I was on his show a couple of months ago. I had the pleasure of coming on, had a very, very deep conversation about things. And he's also the author of The Red Pandemic. And it is his new book. It is out today. And I want to just read a bit of a passage from this. It's The Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult. But before I read this here, I just want to ask Amit, you doing well, sir?
Good evening, Ron. How's it going?
I'm 100% fine. We're just in the midst of a culture war here, Amit. That's why you're on tonight. We need your expertise in this here as a person who's sort of an intellectual in this field. And I hope you don't mind if I read just a paragraph from your work.
Not at all, yeah. Fire ahead there, yeah.
So this is a paragraph, well, sort of a couple of paragraphs from The Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult. And you can buy this book. The link for this is in the description, and I suggest you do it. Now, this is a paragraph. This obviously isn't the full book, but if you want to know the ins and outs of why things are happening today in our country and around the world, I suggest you buy that book. The link for Amit's book is in the description of this Rumble Live. And it says, the most important issue facing humanity at present is the ideology of Marxism and Marxist indoctrination. Though there are now tens of millions of people opposing the effects of globalism and liberalism or progressivism across the West, there is still a major failure to identify the internationalist ideology of Marxism as the origin. Very interesting. Now, this starting part was interested me a lot, and we could just do a 4-hour podcast in this. This ideology is the underlying cause of all the crazy revolutionary behavior we are witnessing in society, including the lack of political unity within nations. Very true. Though many are constantly discussing the symptoms of the problem, the Marxist sub-agendas list below, they are not discussing the source. Very, very relevant. To stop the plague, you must go to the source. Patient zero, in my opinion. Let's go to patient zero, or let's stop the flow of this poison, and it's coming from somewhere. And me and Amit do believe this is coming from China. Now, sub-agendas and compartmentalization. All the major civilization-destroying issues in the world today, the various Marxist sub-agendas, are all driven by revolutionary sentiment. They include mass immigration, the climate change movement, radical sex education, feminism, abortion, BLM, Black Lives Matter, and anti-racism, LGBTQ plus, non-binary, veganism, very important, we're going to speak about that today, and anti-Christianity, which everybody knows I'm sort of not a born-again Christian, but I'm back to Jesus because I know it's the one true belief system. So I really want to speak about that today with the Amit. Crucially, the ideology's presence in any given country also leads to the absence of national sovereignty. We're seeing that today. There's a lack of sovereignty within our nation, of the nation of era. The breakdown of law and order. We're seeing that today. Racial tensions, economic collapse, and the tyrannical partisan censorship, free speech by treacherous pro-globalist governments, i.e. Varadkar, Simon Harris. They may look different, but they are exactly the same. They're just actors in the play, if you want to put it that way. The various Marxist sub-agendas are all based on the class struggle, hence why there's a lot of these boyos, the immigrants being put into lower class and working class areas. I want to speak about that too. Concept of oppressor versus oppressed. We can speak about that in regards to Northern Ireland, the north here, the north of Ireland. We've got an oppressed mindset. Well, a lot of us do anyway. As featured in the Communist Manifesto 1848, the concept has mutated since the ideology first reared its ugly head and now forms the heart of Marxist activist indoctrination. Very big topic. This mutation has been given various labels, including cultural Marxism, which can be problematic as it compartmentalizes the cult ideology somewhat. This compartmentalization. I tried saying that 60,000 times today. My accent inhibits me from saying that word. Must stop. It's all the same movement, the same ideology, the same cult. Amit Connor. What an absolute masterclass. And I couldn't do that justice, by the way. That was a masterclass. When I read that, I was absolutely taken aback, because what you're dealing with there is the truth, extreme truths. And some people might say, Emmett, that would get you banned off every mainstream social media platform there is. So I think what we'll do is a question for you. How did you come about wanting to write such a book? What was your story up until the book? Just brief us on that for the first 10 minutes.
No worries. And by the way, you did a great job there going over it. You're doubting yourself. I think you did a great job. It is such a big, huge subject. And the kind of process happened almost kind of by accident, because I was doing the Resolving Reality Resolving Reality podcast in 2018. And I did a bunch of long form interviews, and I wanted to take a break. And I wanted to kind of work on something while I was changing careers at the time. I was trying to keep a low profile while I was taking a break as well. So I started to write down about different things I was kind of passionate about at the time. All of the kind of globalist stuff that I featured in the podcasts, mass immigration and the trans ideology, the abortion thing, attack on Christianity, everything you listed pretty much. And I started writing away, and I realized as I was writing, there was a certain pattern was forming. First of all, they all connected it with international revolutionary activism, first of all. And then when you mentioned the class struggle concept, that was a big one for me when I realized, wow, especially during BLM, when BLM kicked off, it was apparently over the death of George Floyd, and then it gathered momentum, and before you know it, businesses were being attacked, and people were talking about overthrowing the fascist police state. So I was like, hang on a minute now, what's going on here? And it wasn't until later that the penny dropped for some people when I think her name is Can Coulars. She's in the book, one of the BLM leaders. The video resurfaced of her saying she was Marxist, and it wasn't. The video is from years before, 2015, I think. But it wasn't until she said she was Marxist that people really accepted that, oh, this is a Marxist thing. A lot of people still haven't accepted, but that was kind of alarming to me, that people didn't notice. And I thought, hang on a minute, and I started to examine my idea that the ideology is behind a lot of these problems we're dealing with, but yet nobody's talking about it in social discourse. So then I thought, I have to kind of do something about this. This is like something that needs to be discussed. And I was looking around and thought, well, no one else seems to be kind of doing this at present the way I wanted to do it, looking at the indoctrination. And that's what spurred me on to kind of get stuck into the book pretty much.
Yeah, so basically, you found yourself in a situation where you felt like you were compelled to speak about this. You were watching the craziness around you. You said something there about the Black Lives Matter. For myself, even though it wasn't in my country, I still felt very compelled to be outspoken about the George Floyd situation, because I knew it wasn't just plain sailing that this poor black man was murdered by this terrible cop. I think the irony in that whole situation was how Derek, the cop, willing, just without a struggle, accepted the charge, accepted the sentence, put his hands behind his back, allowed the screws, is that what you call them, the prison officers, to put the handcuffs on him, and he took him away without a struggle. And I can't help but think to myself, if George Floyd hadn't have been filled full of fentanyl and hadn't have robbed a pregnant lady at gunpoint, he probably would still be here today. I could only imagine what it would be like to be a cop in the United States of America in a heavily drug-infested area. And maybe you've not started out as a bad person. Maybe you wanted to start out the change, but now you're met with hostilities left, right, and center. Nobody respects you. And the fact that they called Derek racist while he had, I think his two colleagues were minorities. I think they were minorities. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, on that topic, I've got to, I want to get into your book, but you've just, before we get into it, on that topic, I want to speak about that actually. You that whole George Floyd era, right? That was the Me Too type era too, wasn't it? The Me Too, the George Floyd. The contradictions where you had mass protests across the United States of America during an apparent pandemic. We all know that it was the biggest load of shit, just like the vaccines. But during that time, all these far leftist Marxist communists were on the streets, protesting on the behalf of a fentanyl addict, right? But nobody was social distancing, but they were telling us to social distance. Can you break down the psyche of those types of people and why they would break their own code to protest over a fentanyl addict?
Yeah, it was farcical, wasn't it? And like, there's always these catalyst events. So recently in Ireland, there's Natasha O'Riordan, was a catalyst to promote feminism. In the Me Too movement, there would have been some catalyst events for that one. In the case of BLM, it was the death of George Floyd. So often the cult they'll either generate an event and then use that as a catalyst to push one of their agendas, or they'll pounce on something that was circumstantial. Now, I think that one probably was circumstantial because it involved the police when it kind of happened, which kind of triggered it all off. And as you mentioned there, I mean, people, these criminal people die in the States all the time because it was a white cop to a black suspect. It's ideal because they can start saying it's all about racism when we know it's not. And looking at the video, he was resisting arrest and so on, and he was out of his mind on fentanyl and so on. So obviously he had a responsibility in what happened to him, and the police are doing a very difficult job, etc. But yeah, so the whole thing with the COVID thing as well, tying into with that, we could see how it became really farcical, where they weren't even obeying their own social distancing. So on the one hand, you have the state and the system telling us we can't move from A to B, we need to wear masks and have all these magic needles and so on to get through all this, yet the Marxists are allowed to gather in groups and do their business as usual and promote their ideology, and they're out on the ground, out in the street with the kneeling down, with the fist in the air, the commie fist in the air. So it's just the usual bullshit and double standards. And as you mentioned there, a few things happened that converged all at once, which is another telltale sign that it's international in nature and that it's something big.
Yeah, and you talked about Natasha O'Brien there. I suppose that's more relevant to our area. So, on that note, the hypocrisy, and that, I don't know if you've seen this one, Amit, that I'm not condoning what happened to her, and I don't know the full story, right? And I do not condone violence against women whatsoever. If there's anybody thinking that it's okay to hit women, it's not. You're a scumbag. So that's my stance on that. But at the same time, there was protests all over the country for Natasha, who this violent act happened to. But in the same time frame, there was a 79-year-old woman from the Republic of Ireland who was raped by a foreigner. She was his landlady, should I say. He got drunk, went into her room, viciously raped the 79-year-old woman, and he didn't even receive a prison sentence, and he was just deported. Now, I agree with the deportation, but he didn't receive, for me personally, he should have been put onto the non-swing somewhere, in a bad prison, and the people of the prison should have dealt with him. That's justice, in my opinion. But there was no protests for this 79-year-old lady, and Natasha O'Brien was put up on a pedestal. Look at this big bad misogynistic word. Yes, there is elements to men that can be bad, but they used her as the poster girl, and actually, in my opinion, done a disservice to women, because everybody else is seeing these other news articles of 79-year-old women being raped, no protest, children being snatched, no protest. But Natasha O'Brien, who has publicly came out and has accepted her fame and sort of is pushing government agendas. Now, as a state, I'm totally 100% against the act that happened to her. If that man was in the room with me now, I would say I'll probably punch him in the face myself and say, "How dare you lift your hand to a woman?" But it's the contradictions and the hypocrisies. We're going to protest what happened to Natasha, but a 79-year-old woman being raped, and the man just being deported without any real, ramifications or punishment for that, and that just gets swept under the carpet. In your opinion, what's going on there?
Well, yeah, you raised the point there, and this is a key, and this is a constant theme throughout the book, as well as all the other different tactics that Marxism uses, is the idea of double standards and cherry picking. So they'll pick events and things that happen that suit their agenda, and will actively ignore things that contradict their agenda. So that's why we've seen over the last, 10, 15 years or so, with all the migrant crimes and stuff, the state media and the state, the NGO complex, so on and so forth, well, education system, entertainment industry, they will all work together to actively ignore situations like that, where it's a crime against an indigenous or a white person by someone who isn't of that background because it doesn't suit their agenda. And they'll actively put things on pedestals, like any sort of violence involving females. They'll be able to push feminism with that, so because it suits their agenda. So they have a pre-packaged way of seeing reality, and they need to gather information and present it via the media that kind of fits that reality. So basically, that's what it is. It's double standards and cherry picking. And of course, to talk about the Natasha case, that's nothing at all to do with women's rights or anything like that. Marxism is very good at using groups and individuals to further itself. So BLM is nothing to do with black rights. Feminism is nothing to do with females' rights. The climate change movement has nothing to do with actually helping the planet. Marxism is just very good at using groups and individuals as useful idiots or dummies to push itself forward. And so that whole situation, I haven't really looked into it. Other people have, but I knew straight away when you see someone marching in the street with cameras in their face and they're talking about violence against women, and it's a pandemic of violence against women. No, straight away, it's Marxist activism straight away.
Very interesting, very, very interesting stuff. And yeah, I'm the same. You see something on TV and you just know, well, this is being promoted, so it must be for an agenda. I think that's for the awakened community that are watching this right now. I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that. But we're going to get into those subjects later on in the podcast, because I want to know more about the book. I'm going to buy this book myself. I haven't read the full book, but you have sent me parts of this book, which is, I mean, it's like dangling a carrot in front of me here. I really want to read this book. And as I say, for the people who want to read this book, the link is in the description.
You will enjoy it for sure. About everyone that I know, you're definitely going to like it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We've came to this time now where we have proud patriots like yourself that are intellectuals that know how to write a book, that are absolutely going to destroy the narrative on all the government agendas, which is fantastic. We need that in this little island, because the rest of the world has Jordan Petersons. The rest of the world, they've got England. You've got so many people destroying narratives. Here in Era, we don't have a lot of people destroying narratives, like intellectuals like yourself, that can actually break down a situation and say, well, this is how it is. Because if anybody speaks up in this country, I don't know about you, Amit, you're called far right. And I say, well, listen, I'm not far right. I'm right so far, sorry to tell you. And that's what, that's the term, far right, far right, far right. When actually, none of us are far right. They're calling our 89-year-old grandmothers far right. And actually, this is coming from the far left, i.e. Marxist communists. So, yeah, to go through the sub-agendas and the compartmentalization part here, that you've just lined this. So I didn't even need to make bullet points because you've done this for me. So in the book, you talk about all the different sub-agendas, which is good. Now, one I really want to speak about here is sex education. And it's in two parts here. You've got sex education and LGBTQ. But for me personally, Amit, they are basically the same thing in the school curriculum these days. So can you break down those two? How does sex education and LGBTQ plus, i.e. non-binary, come into the communist agenda?
Well, that's a great point, and I think it's really, really important. And as we know, this is more than just about politics. It's about psychology and behavior and so on. So first of all, if we take the trans movement, first of all, because it's a bit more easier to see the connection with that, we know that that's an extension of the whole gay rights movement back in the day, which kicked off in whatever, well, it goes way back in history, but if we want to put a marker on it, the 60s and 70s, it started to gain more prominence, particularly in the US. And again, it's the same formula. In order to make people get out in the street and start marching, you have to make them think they're oppressed somehow, that their lives would be better, but they just need to change the system and everyone else needs to get on board with it. And out they go on the street with the placards and so on. So the gay rights movement eventually turned into the LGBTQ movement. So, the bisexual thing came in a bit more prominent. and in the fore in the pop culture, and then the trans movement on top of that, and now non-binary and so on. So it comes in different waves, but that class struggle principle is always there, of the oppressor versus oppressed. It's very important to generate that, because it generates over feminine emotions in people, where they start feeling like they need to care for strangers in society, you know. Now, I'm not saying we should never look after other people and stuff, but this idea of leading with your emotions and thinking, well, oh God, trans people are oppressed, so we need to all of a sudden now have education about this, and we need to change the constitution, and all of a sudden you got the wheels of revolution moving all of a sudden, based on a notion that people are being oppressed when they probably aren't. So, and the sexual education thing is a little bit interesting, and that's definitely part of Marxism, but that leads into the bigger picture stuff, right? But start to scratch the surface is that I think that, and this ties into some other areas. I'll try to encapsulate this quick, but we've seen how a lot of the different Marxist agendas seem to be applying to westernized, capitalistic, traditionally Christian, and Caucasian countries. And there's definitely a eugenics aspect to all of this, as in, producing certain results and birth rates and creating new types of human beings. So we can get back to that if you like. There's definitely a eugenics thread running through Marxism, going right back in history. So the whole idea of getting control of the sexual education and indoctrinating kids is basically this. And the feminist movement has been responsible for laying the foundations for this. The whole idea was to take the idea of sex away from reproduction and to hedonism. That sex is about fun, getting your kicks and all that, rather than having stable monogamous childbearing relationships. And that's where the eugenics come in. And so the sex education thing, it's tied in with other parts, tentacles of the monster. But ultimately, the most important thing that affects us in the West is that it drives down the birth rates. And it also produces degenerate personalities. So it produces people who are scatty, who are all about being in the moment and just feeling pleasure, with no sort of comprehension of the consequences of their actions on a bigger picture scale. And it also ties into the mental health thing we were talking about before in our correspondence, of imbalancing people mentally. And I think I'll leave it there because it links into a lot of other things.
Very, very interesting. There's so many ways to react to that, but there's so many things to go through. But what I will say in regards to that, as a religious person myself that believes in Jesus Christ, I would say that there is, there's a breakdown of society whenever we move away from the man and woman relationship, and sex is for procreation, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we do it for just our own pleasure. Like, we're not dolphins. Do you know what I mean? We're not swimming to the bottom, even though, yes, sex is pleasurable, but the reality of it is it's to create other human beings. And in itself, we need to keep that boundary, whether that be for Christian reasons or just for moral reasons, because society is this whole society's been built on Christianity, especially the West, and it was built on the foundation of mum and dad and the family unit. And we've moved so far away from that now that there is a degeneracy within society. It's a rot that's set in. You've got young girls saying, well, I don't want to have a relationship with that man over there because I can start an OnlyFans and make 20K a month. Yeah. And they're not happy. And there's lots of suicides through the roof, through men and women. There's a mental health crisis. And for me, the fact that we're in an era right now where people have access to so much money, they can make so much money, but there's a mental health crisis. Well, let's go back 100 years ago. There wasn't a mental health crisis. There was a money crisis. People had less money. People found it very hard to make money. But now we've got lots of money, but a mental health crisis. So that's an indication that there is a rot that's set into society, and we need to get back to our Christian ways, come back to Jesus, come back to, even if you don't believe in Jesus, come back to our Christian ways, respect women, find a partner. If you're a young girl, find a man that's going to love you, that's going to settle down, have a relationship with, have children, and benefit society and teach them good values. Right now, we're not doing that. We've got kids stuck to their phones. Pornography is another big one, expectations of what a man should be and what a woman should be. And it's a cultural breakdown, isn't it? That's essentially what it is, and that's for a Marxist is fantastic. And you know,
Mhm.
I'm going to say this now. If you look at all the big sort of degenerate sites that are selling porn or degeneracy, a lot of them are Jewish. And I have to
Mhm.
just call a spade here. A lot of them are Jewish, man. And it's like, oh, you're supposed to be Jews, rabbis, but you've got the Jews, you've got that Rabbi Smuley who's got a sex shop with his daughter. Just it's all weird shit. And to me, it's like, if you're supposed to be the chosen people of God, why are you promoting so much weirdness within society? Why have you got sex shops with your daughter? That's just strange. So for me, we need to get away from Islam. We need to get away from Judaism. Christ is king. Come back to Jesus Christ. And honestly, in my opinion, everything will be saved. That's just my opinion, though, for what it's worth. So yes, veganism. Because this is a part in your book that's very interesting, because a lot of people are going to say, veganism? What are you talking about, veganism? Veganism, how does veganism come into the Marxist agenda?
Well, I actually this kind of happened again by accident, and I was playing around with that concept of class struggle in my head, of the oppressor versus oppressed, and we see the pop culture is pretty much telling us once society becomes infected with Marxism, the pop culture starts to tell you the different agendas being pushed, and veganism has been catching on. And not only is it just, it always seems like it's a grassroots movement, but when you see it being pushed by the United Nations, and you have like the Fabian socialist mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, talking about getting Londoners on this planetary health diet, something's going on here. Now, people might say, and I deal with this a lot when I'm doing space and stuff, people would say, what's he talking about this stuff for? Why aren't we talking about voting or political parties? Is because they don't understand how serious it is, what I'm trying to address here. So veganism is obviously an unnatural diet. A lot of people call it the New World Order diet. Again, it's based on oppressor versus oppressed. The idea that the animals are oppressed and we are the oppressors, and that this is wrong and it shouldn't be. The whole revolution again. And the way to fix this and make it more moral is for all of us to start eating leaves and tofu and so on, right? Now, we talked about how Marxism destroys civilization, and it's particularly attacking Western countries. One of the effects of people going the vegan diet, and the people who are staunch nationalists who want to stick it to the cops in Kulak or whatever else, what you need is a bit of toxic masculinity. What you need is strong men, masculine men. That's how it defends society, and that's how it's been for millennia. But if everyone's walking around eating tofu and leaves, there's three major things that impacts. Number one, and we've seen the attack on testosterone coming from the feminist movement as well, toxic masculinity and so on. So the feminist movement has psychologically been demoralizing males and masculinity and demonizing masculinity. So that's the psychological attack. The biological attack is coming from, amongst other things, veganism. So veganism attacks the human organism in three ways. Number one, because it's a cholesterol deficient diet, and your body, the cholesterol's received a bad rap, but there's a bit of nuance to the debate here. But basically, most cells in your body are constructed of cholesterol. It's like the building blocks of the body, of the cells. And if you have a vegan diet, it's cholesterol deficient. Now, your body can make some, but not enough. You need to get it from your diet. So you need to eat animal products, meats, egg, cheese, milk, all traditional agricultural diet, like the one we used to eat in Ireland. But when someone goes vegan, they're deficient of those raw materials. So basically it leads to three big things, which the UN, being a eugenics Marxist organization, is very interested in. One of them is accelerated aging, right? So the whole depopulation thing, your Bill Gates pandemic stuff, et cetera, right? So that old chestnut eugenics. The second one is that, and this is a big one, it cholesterol, your endocrine system needs cholesterol to function. So the system for making hormones. So how does this tie into the other Marxist agendas? Well, the trans movement, non-binary stuff. The vegan diet is perfect to complement trans and also to drive down the birth rates. Because if people aren't healthy on a hormonal level, you have a drop in fertility, which you have a problem with anyway, and people can't reproduce. So that's the second reason, the endocrine system and hormones. The third reason is mental health. Your brain is mostly composed of water and fats. On a cholesterol diet, a cholesterol deficient diet like veganism, your body will take a while to break down. It will eat up itself for a while, but when it runs out of cholesterol, it will start to eat the brain as well. So you get early onset Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, of course, but also scaddiness, poor concentration, and the inability to control emotions. So that dovetails quite nicely with schizo behavior, Marxism, etc. So again, this kind of stuff goes over people's heads if they don't have the knowledge, and that's what the book is for. Me personally, I've had a casual interest in nutrition for about 20, 25 years. So that's why it kind of resonated with me, and I felt it deserved a mention because it's based on the oppressor versus oppressed class struggle principle.
Absolutely fascinating and first-hand experience on that, Amit. You know yourself. I went down to Dublin to the protest, and I came face to face with Antifa, i.e., the Marxists, the demonic. I faced them right to their face, and most of these people are on a vegan diet. One thing I noticed, apart from the smell, that is, I mean, they smell absolutely atrocious. They don't wash. So that leads back to Karl Marx. He was also very dirty. Take that for what you will. Was the lack of intellect. So the hymn, the rhyming of like the sort of the mantra of the radical left is refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. Right? Which, okay, I don't disagree with you. Every country has to do its fair share of helping people. I'm not against helping refugees in that sense. We just need a cap on it. But it was the intellect. Whenever I look at you, Amit, I can tell that there's a soul looking back at me, and hopefully you get the same feeling from me. But whenever I look at these people in the eye, like I did right up close when they pushed me onto the road and the Gardaí persecuted against us that time, I felt like there was no soul. And if you look at their diet, as you say, the lack of testosterone, just on that basis alone, it's for me, eating steak is a necessary thing in life. Eating good, clean meats, chicken, drinking plenty of water, salts, as you say, the whole cholesterol thing. To me, that's made me feel 10 times better than any antidepressant, any witchcraft pharmaceuticals that's given out to you, that's prescribed to you. And within the far left community, it's promoted to sort of be addicted to pharmaceuticals, i.e. witchcraft, in my opinion. And to me, that's not a coincidence either. These people, low testosterone, beta males, very hypocritical, contradict themselves all the time. But actually, the brain chemistry to them makes sense, because if they weren't acting that way, then it would be strange, because they're acting that way because, a component to that would be their diet. Their diet is actually the brain chemistry of who they are. Like the whole new thing is eating bugs. But as you just say, you take away the protein altogether. A lot of these people just eat vegetables and fruit all day. They have no healthy balance in their body like they should. And they're completely tapped in the head because of just the component alone of their diet. Their diet inhibits them from even thinking clearly. I myself have went through periods of my life where I haven't ate clean, and I've maybe ate too much processed food, or maybe I didn't eat enough meat and I was eating too many vegetables all the time because it's easier just to put on a couple of potatoes or chips or something. I'm thinking a lot more different. I can look back at those times now and think to myself, well, yeah, I was a different person now. I'm eating steaks, eggs, chicken. I'm working out. I'm running. I'm swimming. I've even got a better relationship with my family, my son, my missus. With the life of the far leftist, eating the odd bug now and again, the odd grub now and again, and leaves and tofu, and I think there was a study came back about soy reduces testosterone. Quote me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah,
it's interesting to see, because that's they're, at least with their chemical makeup inhibits them from critical thinking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it all kind of works together, doesn't it? And clearly, the kind of the ideology pushing all these different things attacks the person on so many different levels. And you mentioned eating vegetables and stuff there, and I don't want to knock you off track, but when you look at, say, even the vegetables, I mean, I worked in farming myself as well for a while in Australia and stuff, and glyphosate is a problem. Roundup, it's sprayed on the vegetables. That's estrogenic as well. So if someone's going vegan and just eating vegetables all day and are eating fruit all day, which is, fructose isn't too good for you either. It's just destructive all the way. And, if they're being brainwashed to be scatty and they can't control their emotions, and the kind of people who are sucked into the cult tend to be a little bit imbalanced in the first place. And then you throw in veganism on top of that, and someone's given them loads of confidence and told them to get out there and change the world. It's a recipe for disaster, and they'd be better off getting stuck into a fatty diet,
They can't change anything. It's to sort of source this back to your book and to tie this into what you're saying. The reason why that diet is available to a lot of people and promoted to a lot of people, because it creates an imbalance within the body that makes you a very pliable person, a beta male that will be a male feminist, not in the good way. Like, for instance, I wouldn't promote badness towards women, but I'm not a male feminist. Anybody that says they're a male feminist, the reason why they say that is because they want to have sex with feminists. Let's face fact, right? If there's any women watching this right now and I ever approach you and say, oh, by the way, I'm a male feminist, know that that's a complete lie. I've just lied to you, right? So
it's a cheap way of getting in there.
It's a cheap way and that's the thing to it. There's these, and they are a part of the communistic Marxist movement because they are the beta male soldiers. I don't want to misquote this. He says, I forget who said this. No, actually, it was Malcolm X. Malcolm X said, and I always quote this. There was another quote I was going to say, but there was a better quote. Malcolm X, one of the greatest human beings. I think it was Malcolm X. It was one of the greatest human beings in America. He stated, "Beware of the white liberal because they are the most destructive force on earth." And he was a black guy fighting for black rights, and he could see where the future was going. And that's, that was way back in the day. That's going way back decades ago. He's seen this. And the Marxist agenda, Black Lives Matter, Islam. I want to speak to you about Islam in just a little minute, how that formed the religious cult towards, for the Marxist agenda. But the chemical imbalance that's created in these people because this lifestyle is promoted, it draws them to the Marxist lifestyle. It's like you look at their bios and they've got vegan, they, them. They've got pronouns or whatnot. Do you know what I mean? Feminist. They're ticking the boxes of the cultural Marxist. And if you want to be in that group, you have to be a part of one of these sub-agendas as you've got in your book. And I don't know if you've got Islam down there, but I want to speak to you about Islam.
It's in the book, yeah.
Oh, it is in the book. It is. I suppose that comes in within. Well, Islam isn't anti-Christianity because in Islam they even stated at the start of the Quran that Jesus' word is the word of God. So I don't understand why any Muslim worships the Prophet Muhammad. Because if their book literally states Jesus' word is the word of God, Jesus Christ is God. So I don't, just on a side debate or a side thing there. So Islam, where does Islam come into the cultural Marxist revolution?
Well, it's a really interesting one because, Islam goes back to the 7th century, unless my date is off there. But it's obviously been around a long time. And it itself has been kind of a revolutionary force, with since the time Muhammad with Islamic Jihad and all the struggle, the waves spreading across Europe into Spain and so on. There's a whole big history there. So obviously it predates Marxism quite a lot. But there is such a thing, because Marxism say if we want to pick the French Revolution, which is the late 1700s, if we want to pick the French Revolution as being like a proto-Marxist event. So obviously Islam's much older, but there is such a thing as Islamo-socialism. It's an alliance that goes back quite far back into history, particularly in the Middle East. And it's quite interesting that you would think, how's this alliance supposed to work? Because Marxism is ostensibly atheist. But there are some similarities as well, where in Islam, the more hardcore variants want, an Islamic caliphate for the world. They have a concerted interest in destroying Christianity, even though it says in the Quran that they respect Jesus. Looking at the history of jihad and the Crusades and all of that, there's been a lot of animosity towards Christianity in the past. So that's another reason why there's a kind of a weird alliance there, because Marxism, they both have an interest in destroying Western civilization. And you see how in the UK, what's happening is the UK is obviously different. Mainland UK is different to Ireland in that, it's ethnically different. There's a lot more Muslims there. Obviously, we can see now the alliance between the political system and Islam. They're kind of working together. So I think that's the main thing. And I've thought about this before. And they're so different. But yet they work together because they both have an interest in destroying and kind of upending the West and turning everything around. And I think that we've seen how the Islamification of the West has been enabled by the Marxists. And we saw in Dublin, they use Croke Park to have their prayer. They've done it a few times, I think. You see them around the European cities praying in the streets and so on. This is what happens when you have an open borders situation, and the open borders situation has been facilitated by the Marxists and created by the Marxists in the first place. So it's really a weird alliance, but there's definitely a mutual benefit to both of them doing this. And before I pass the mic over, it's interesting that there's no feminism, LGBTQ, trans, or abortion or anything within the Muslim community, So one of the big effects of Islam in the West is the differential in birth rates, So Western women, while they're chasing their careers, traveling the world, being more hedonistic and whatever, self-orientated, you could say, the Muslim women don't do that. They have kids and they start earlier. So Marxism understands, because Marxism has an interest in destroying Christianity, destroying the West, destroying the traditional family unit, affecting the birth rates. It likes all those objectives, and Islam's going to do a really good job for Marxism of enforcing all those changes and effects, basically.
Satanic. It's, as a person now that's awakened from a conspiracy theorist to a truther, now to the truth, it's satanic. It's 100% satanic, and it's I suppose the term for that would be secular progressivism, where it's a term that I'm just looking into. I'm not fully aware of what it actually means, so forgive me if I misquote what it means here. You'll probably know better than me, Amit. But my knowledge of it is they will advocate for something that they're against because it can eradicate the thing that they hate even more. And even though inevitably they would be, the LGBTQ are the first people that are going to be hung from the gallows by radical Islamic extremists, the LGBTQ, Marxists, communists, progressives today will still advocate for their own demise because it still will have a negative effect on, say, for example, the patriarchy, or not a patriarchy, but the culture that they really hate. It's a self-imploding thing. Secular progressivism, it's a self-imploding idea, but inevitably it's like I'm going to blow myself up and take everybody out. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because I hate this world so much. And it's, that's why I do believe, Judaism is satanic. I believe Islam is satanic. Obviously, Christianity isn't satanic. It's the one true belief system. And that's why it's constantly attacked and mocked on a daily basis. But the reason why the progressives, cultural Marxists are using Islam is for that reason, secular progressivism, which I'm looking into. And they will inevitably kill them, but they will also kill us. And if you're the devil, that's what you want. You want everybody dead. And I do believe that these people, I've got a clip here. Maybe I'll share it to the screen of a radical leftist communist talking about how she's had 45 abortions and she's going for more and she loves killing babies. And they're the type of people that support Islam and want Islam to take over, even though that Islam would punish her to death for doing what she done. But she will allow that to come in because that Islamic system will also hurt me and they want to see me hurt. So they will self-sacrifice themselves as long as I get hurt also. Do you know what I mean? It's a weird, demonic, satanic mind frame to have, where I'm looking at that and I don't want that woman to have any more abortions, and I want to forgive her and hug her and tell her everything's going to be okay and I'm here for her, and let's start a community and let's get better, where she doesn't want that. She wants destruction and anarchy, which is i.e. satanic. And I suppose that is Islam can be used as the religious weapon against the pure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're drawing some great dots there. And to address the first one about the like lemmings, where they happily sacrifice themselves for the revolution, is a big theme in the ideology. And also the ideology comes in waves. That's another theme. So the what people call the lefties, open border types, will bring in the Muslims who will wipe them out through demographic replacement. So there's no reward for being in the Great Revolution. Marxism is full of that, where people sacrifice themselves or their own people, or they betray their own people to benefit another group, and that group comes in and finishes them off. It's full of that, And also the whole pathological altruism thing is another theme. We were talking about it with veganism, people destroying themselves to help something outside themselves, to save the animals, or people are for mass immigration and open borders to save people from another part of the world, but yet they destroy their own people in the process. It's this self-sacrifice thing that's somehow kind of noble, and it's really twisted. And as for the satanic stuff, well, actually, I don't know if you want to get into that. And definitely there's, I talk about the occult and Satanism a bit within the book, because that's essentially what Marxism is. It's Satanism repackaged. But the reason why I don't put that much emphasis on that is because we're playing a game of numbers here. And what I'm trying to achieve is to get as many people as possible on board with the anti-Marxist message, right? Now, as you know, we're not all the same. And we talked about this before in our correspondence. If you have a bit more of a conspiratorial mindset, sometimes it turns people off. We're not all the same. I appreciate that. So what I decided to do in the book was not go into that too much, because it can turn people off sometimes. But that's the kind of parts of it that I enjoy the most myself, getting right into the depth of it. And for anyone who's not familiar with the concept, and there's a few different interpretations of what Satanism is, but it's basically the idea that humanity is no good and doesn't deserve to be here, that humanity is worthless. And we can see that undertone in all of the Marxist sub-agendas, like abortion. It's the ultimate anti-humanity act. Or veganism even says that we don't have the right to use the animals for food, which is according to God's plan. And the climate change movement, it says that human beings themselves are a problem for the planet and we shouldn't be here and we need to reduce population levels. That's the way the UN talks, and Bill Gates and so on. So that anti-humanity satanic undertone is there as well as the one everyone spots, which is the inversion, the satanic inversion, when things are turned upside down or backwards. Like, for example, male is now female, female is now male. You can see the satanic undertones throughout the whole ideology.
Yeah, and that, I get what you're saying there. You said something at the beginning that you don't want to turn people off. And if there's anybody watching this here, I know I come across a bit extreme sometimes to talk about Jesus all the time, but that's because I want to spread the love that's in my heart right now. I don't hate anybody. I want everybody to feel the love. I want everybody to feel the savior that's upon me. But I do understand that there's people out there that don't believe, and there's atheists. There's atheists that aren't wrapped up within the wokeness, and they're not wrapped up within the satanic, and they like the Christian way of lifestyle. They just don't believe in Christianity because they're atheist. And I do understand that there's Muslims that watch this here that are like, well, man, I don't want to hurt anybody, Christians, Jews, or anything like that. And there's Jews watching this here that that think the exact same thing. So I get what you're saying, and you're right. But if there's anybody watching this here and say they're atheist, everybody's welcome into the anti-extinctionist club. So, what you're technically talking about here is you're talking about extinctionists, people who want to wipe human beings off the face of the planet. If they had access to a meteorite that could wipe us all out, or a comet that could wipe us all out, they would use that. And, sometimes I'd be thinking to myself, is that why these sort of far leftists are pushing for war? Because they understand that most big countries have nuclear warheads, and they want these countries to press the red button and all these bombs to go off at the same time, because they actually hate us. They hate humanity, i.e. they are Satan if you're atheist, negative, very, very negative. So I get where you're coming from, that we need to be very inclusive towards people. But for me personally, as an sort of an ex-atheist, I've been in two worlds. Like, I didn't really believe, but now I know what the truth is. I can say that every answer that you're looking for is in Christianity. It's not in atheism or Islam or Judaism. If you're getting feelings, religious, spiritual feelings, follow the Bible. It tells you where to go. I know there's a lot of contradictions in the Bible, and let's not walk away from that either. There is a lot of contradictions, and Orthodox Christians are also very susceptible to communism, believe it or not. So, I'm not being hypocritical here by leaving out, and and you've got the Catholic Church thing with the child molestation against from the Catholic Church, demonic, evil, terrible, absolutely disgusting. Those people don't represent me. They don't represent Amit. They don't represent anybody. So the difference between us and them, we're going to call out the bad people on our side and say, we don't want you, get away, go away, you're evil people. But it's coherently extinctionists that are running the other side, the far leftist Marxist communist revolution right now. They're extinctionists. They do not want you here. They hate you. And that's what I believe anyway. I don't know what you feel about that. Do you think that they are extinctionists in that way?
Yeah, there's definitely they're trying to, as I talk about in the book. By the way, there's a whole section in the book that I talk about the importance of protecting Christianity, because it's one of the pillars of Western civilization. I can expand on that if you want. But the idea of great. So the idea of the destruction thing is, they want to. There's, like as I talk about in the book, there's an ideology behind Marxism, and Satanism is a good enough label for it. And that whatever's pushing this, wherever this originated from, is trying to achieve global control and to create more of a dark world. So I don't want to go off the deep end too much if you don't want me to. But basically, they're going to, people are going to die, but also new types of human beings are going to be created where they're going to be more subservient. People are more willing to go along with the global agenda. You see now they're trying to do it on an ethnic level. They're trying to destroy, again, the anti-God or anti-nature thing for the atheists, if they prefer that term, where, they want to destroy the races ethnically in so many ways and create just a mix. So all of the beauty of creation and individuality, originality is going to be gone. It's going to be a dull hell world where people are just subservient to the system, where we're all in solidarity, quote unquote, in a socialist federation of the world run by the UN or whatever. And there's definitely a genocidal eugenics element to all this that can't be denied. And we see it being pushed through, whether it's the COVID agenda or the birth rates, whether it's the sex ed, mental health, anti-Christianity, you name it. There's definitely a genocidal undertones to all this.
And just to let you know, everything that we're speaking about here is in Emmett's book, The Red Pandemic, and the link for that is in the description if you want to go and buy that. And I would suggest you do. You can have a one-to-one with yourself reading this book and go over this. So if you want to buy the book, the link is in the description, and I would urge you to go and do that. So everything we're speaking about is in that book. So I want to speak about something with you, off the points that I've got here. I think we briefed about it at the start, but the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a plan. It was farcical. It wasn't real. Yes, COVID was real. I'm not a denier that COVID exists, but we spoke about this, I think it was yesterday or today, where what I believe is that COVID was a communistic weapon sent from China that was, obviously China's infiltrated the United States of America with Fauci. Now it's all come out. He's getting destroyed. Fauci was an agent of China that sort of was their political wing high up in the United States that released COVID, killed a few people, but not enough to make everybody really scared. But they inflated the numbers to make it look like it was more. It shut down us in the West economically, while China was still going full steam ahead. Now, to me, that's an act of war, because the Chinese, they aren't going to beat the Americans in a fist fight because they're tiny little people, but they are more intelligent than the Americans and the Western people, so they will economically destroy us because they're communists. Communists always play the long game. You need to understand that. So do you think I would be right in my assessment that COVID was an act of economical war against the West?
Oh, absolutely. And, even the normies, everybody knew from what the mainstream media was saying that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was involved. Now, of course, if people haven't really studied communism, they might not see the significance of that. But for anyone who doesn't know, China is a one-party state. They've about 5 or 6 different token parties, but they're all subservient to the CCP. I think it's called the Popular Front or whatever. And so nothing happens in China without the Chinese government's knowledge or approval. And the Americans actually put this in the book. The Americans were watching, I think the Department of Defense was watching the Wuhan Institute of Virology for being involved in biological weapons research and so on. So, I mean, the dots, they're not difficult to find. But the fact that it became global all of a sudden, and the fact the fact that the Western media was involved, scaremongering and so on. And then another Marxist trick typically is bring out the experts, right? All these experts talking about how dangerous it is. We need the magic needle, etc., etc. You don't just need one, you need several to get through this. And then you have the restriction of people's movements. And then you have how many people you're allowed to have in the house at the one time, what you can buy in the supermarket. This is all totalitarianism. And then you mentioned the economic side of it as well. That was something that went over a lot of people's heads when it happened. Of course, it was terrible. The amount of people who their businesses were shut down. Some people were forced to close down. They tried to reopen. If they reopened, they got in trouble, etc. But yeah, absolutely, it slowed down the economy in a big way across the West. So it was actually a several pronged attack on the economy, because on the one hand, people weren't allowed to go to work. People weren't allowed to travel so many ways. People weren't allowed to run their businesses, right? Which is an attack on the economy in and of itself. But then on top of that, we had the extension of the welfare state, which was COVID payments. So that's one thing. Another red flag, another commie red flag, is when you have the government wanting to give people free money, right? Which is another extension of socialism. It's a socialist principles, where all the wealth is in the control of the state, and the people's financial sovereignty is being taken away, is another surefire sign that there's some socialism at play here. So I think you're right in the money with your analysis there. It was an economic attack on the West. And I was the same. When it came out first, I kind of thought the whole thing was made up. Then I realized something was going around, but that was no more than a flu, essentially. But it's the way they used it was the giveaway. The way they used that situation, the way the media spoke about it, and everything else I mentioned gave it away to me as being an internationalist, the fingerprints of international communism all over it.
Yeah, like, people have to realize it, and yeah. Well, thanks for confirming that for me, because that's I, a lot of my family members got the vaccine. I want to sort of talk about the vaccine here a little bit. A lot of my family members got the vaccine. There's a family member in particular, hasn't been right since. Now, I'm very stubborn. I'm, even from a young age, I never really trusted anybody, only trusted my gut. Always knew that there was a fakeness to the world, actually, looking back to it. Now, not everybody's like that. And during the COVID pandemic, I realized that there's a lot of people that have been pretending to be my friend, and they're not. Actually, if the Nazis formed and came back, they would be the first one to hand me over and say, put him in a concentration camp for their own gain. They would do it without a blink of an eye. So it's made me very antisocial, and I don't have antisocial behavior, but I'm very antisocial today, because I know I can't trust anybody, because every other person's a snake. So, like, there's people that were telling on their neighbors because they were out doing things when they shouldn't have been out. There was people out, maybe opening a business, getting a haircut, and they were snitching on the people doing that. And you had the police state, and then you had the vaccine. Now, this is where it got me. Anybody with half a brain cell could tell you that pumping an experimental liquid into your body, that isn't a vaccine, by the way, it's an mRNA, that it doesn't, like a vaccine, you put into your arm, your body attacks it, you get the antibodies, and everybody's A-okay. This here, you inject it into yourself, and it travels around your whole body, and it sits in the woman's ovaries. We're seeing a massive amount of stillbirths, which goes into your eugenics theory, by the way, of what's going on here. Yep. They want less white people, basically, or they want less Westerners, and that would link in with that. So for me, whenever I'm watching people, like, I live and die by the sword. somebody could come through the door with an AK-47. I'm not taking that vaccine. Shoot me in the head, because I would rather have that bullet than that liquid. But then there's people out there that were so easily manipulated into taking it that are now harmed by it. And as I spoke about prior to the podcast, I says that I'm getting a few vaccine injured people on that worked in the medical field that lost their job because they were vaccine injured. They were completely swept under the rug. We don't want to hear you. This is, you expose too much. In your opinion, Amit, where does the vaccine come into this? Should we be conspiratorial about this? Was it to reduce women giving birth? Is there nanotechnology in it? Will it turn us into reptilians? Or does it do what exactly it says in the tin? It's just, but they were just gauging how compliant people are. Where is your mind frame around the vaccine?
Well, yeah, this is a very interesting question. I put a bit of thought into it, what they were trying to achieve with it. And maybe there was also several batches from what I know. So maybe there was different types of vaccines, because, the way when people are getting injected, they don't actually know themselves what's in the injection, even though it may come from certain batches, or I think Pfizer or whatever, so there could be, maybe there was different types of experiments conducted. But I definitely think, number one, like you were saying, females in particular, the amount of reports of females have miscarriages and so on, or whatever, because of this is a red flag, and fits into what we were talking about. The United Nations involved, the World Health Organization is involved. I mean, the director, for God's sake, the Director General of the World Health Organization is Ghebreyesus, wherever his name is, who was a member of a Marxist organization back in Somalia. So you couldn't make this stuff up, But so if you have the UN involved, the WHO involved, and their people are letting themselves getting injections into their bodies from this Marxist organization. No, there's something going on here. So the birth rates thing definitely is part of it. I think one of the things that the vaccine probably did, and I've noticed problems with every person I've met who's had the vaccine, behavioral problems or some sort of issues, whether even if it might be someone just being a little bit dopey or a little bit not interested in bigger picture stuff, right? Because imagine me and you were running the world around, and we were trying to enforce some sort of internationalist socialist federation, the world, or whatever you want to call it. What would we like the vaccine to do? I would like it to pacify people, to dope them up, essentially, to make them not interested in bigger picture stuff, to make them more easily stressed out, so they don't do any serious thinking.
Fear.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of people that have had the vaccine, they do not want to listen to you when it comes to any type of world agendas that you're trying to expose. They're like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Please don't tell me. Please don't tell me. But before, maybe they would have entertained my idea, even though they disagreed with me. Now they're like, no, I don't want to. I don't know if that is because I don't know if that's because they realized that COVID and the vaccines were a scam. So
it's hard to know.
They're afraid to even speak about it. Or has there been a numbing off the brain in certain sections of the brain? Because I walk down the street and I feel like I'm in the Matrix. I may as well have a long trench coat with I don't want to, I'm not a narcissist or anything, but I'm not walking down the street with my arms swinging, but I feel like I'm in the Matrix because I'm looking at all these people, their alcohol, their food, and I'm going, wow, every single one of you are, forgive my language, fucked. Do you know what I mean? You have all had the vaccine and you aren't looking up into the sky. And I look up, any chance I get, I look up into that sky. Any chance I get, I watch the nature. I look at the simple things in life and just be thankful that I'm here. I can never have depression or anxiety because it's 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance that I'm even here, 1,000,000,000,000 to 1 chance that I'm even here. So I thank the Lord every day that I am here. But I'm looking around at all these people and I'm thinking to myself, you have sold out to the devil. You have sold out to the negative. You have sold out to globalism. And I'm so thankful that I didn't sell out to globalism. I'm so happy that I didn't sell out, So yes, there could be something to that there's a numbing of the brain. I never thought about it that way, but there is. I don't know if you know about this, Amit. This isn't 100% proven. I have to state that, but there was they tried to patent DNA a good few years back, and a Supreme Court, I think it was in the United States of America, says that under no circumstances are you allowed to patent Mother Nature. But there was a clause in this sort of law, if you were able to change Mother Nature, then you can patent the mutation. But the theory is around the COVID-19 vaccinations is that it changed the DNA a tad, a little bit within the human being itself, and Pfizer, Moderna, the source that it leads back to, owns the patent to that version of that DNA, which in turn would mean that anybody that has that DNA doesn't have the same human rights as, say, somebody who doesn't have the vaccine. Now, that's a wild conspiracy theory that isn't proven. It's probably not true. It's even crazy for myself to think. But if there's any truth to that, it would make sense to the globalist Marxist community that want to own things. Well, let's own people. Let's not give them the same rights as the other people have. Let's own let's own who they are, and they will be under our rights. So when the time comes, who knows what was in that vaccine? Who knows what was in those things? Who knows what's coming for the future? But all I know is during the pandemic, the only thing that was allowed to go full steam ahead without any social distancing or anything was the 5G towers. 5G went live during the pandemic, and for me, that was no coincidence.
Yeah, there's a few great things there. And first of all, I forgot to mention as well, how could I forget that the vaccine, no doubt there's a connection between the vaccine and this whole gender bending trans stuff. So, people turning trans or being gender confused after having the vaccines is another one as well. And to add on to what you were saying, if females are able to give birth, or obviously the males are obviously different, but anyone who's had the vaccines would be very interested to see the genetic makeup of the children that they have, what their psychological predisposition is, whether or not they end up trans is an interesting one,
Very interesting. Or even the long game, though, Emmett, because we know the communists will play the 100-year game because they're it's like a beehive. They work for the central control, the queen bee, the queen government. So is it the long game? Maybe it's not so much the effect that it has on the population now, but maybe it's the effect that it'll have on future generations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's nothing. This ideology is it's been burned away for quite a while, but it does definitely has that because it is evil and it is Satanism repackaged. It needs to come sometimes. It needs to be patient and also come with a nice benevolent veneer on it sometimes. From a human rights, peace, justice, solidarity, and compassion. Blah blah blah. But it's also quite patient. So I think the vaccine, we're very interested to see an independent study on that. And I'm not knock you off track here, but it gets into the Satanism stuff. One of the ingredients in one of the vaccines apparently was called luciferase. I don't know if you heard that one.
Yeah, man, you're making my head go crazy here, right? Because I never knew that. So you're telling me what was the component? What is that component consistent of? What is it? Is it just a coincidence? Maybe it's not a coincidence.
I didn't chase it down because I was busy with other stuff, and I do like that stuff. So I'm a bit like a bloodhound or whatever. If I was going to start chasing my nose on that one, I'd go into a tangent and I'd forget what I was working on. So I don't know if it was an article or it might have been on Twitter or something, but I remember someone talked about one of the ingredients in one of the patent fact was luciferase. And because you see how another example of the same thing is, say, with the vegan movement. I think in Japan they have this food called seitan or something. So I mean, it sounds funny, but also it's like we've seen how gullible people can be in the general public with certain things. So not to knock you off track here, but it's called in the occult, it's called revelation of the method, where there's people in the world fucking with our heads, and they like actually dropping little clues for us here and there. So luciferase would fit into that category of someone higher up the chain, Bill Gates or whatever it is, literally deciding on that name on purpose to tell us what they're really up to, which is the transforming the earth into a dark world, et cetera, and they like leaving these little Easter eggs around the place. But that was a good one, and it stuck in my head.
Well, I have to, I've got a little bit of knowledge on this one now, Emmett, that you'll be you'll be maybe thankful for. Maybe you can take this with you. So within Satanism, I'm not talking about Satanism worshiping yourself, the sort of the front, the magazine that is Satanism. I'm not talking about the what's out there, what people know. I'm talking about the
Exactly.
elitists, the people in Hollywood, the people who really worship the devil. Because believe it or not, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're a Bible basher in this here." No, 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 you don't understand. There's people in Hollywood that worship the devil a lot more than what I would worship God. Everything they do is for the devil. And one of the key things within this elitism type, the adrenochrome, they're drinking adrenochrome, they're molesting children, they own abortion centers where they sacrificed all those children to the devil. One of the things that they believe in is karma, believe it or not. And the people go, "What do you mean they believe in karma?" Sure, they're killing babies, they're molesting children. Yes, I know that, but they also believe in karma on a global scale. So you'll have Satanists like Barack Obama. You'll have a lot of these people that are in the Satan world. You'll have Jay-Z. You've got the Illuminati side to this. And what they do is they will give you clues within their movies. So, for instance, COVID-19, right? The movies that they would have made prior to that were very similar, because there was a lot of things in movies that would have made you think, well, that's very similar to COVID-19. That's them telling you what they're doing. So you had Barack Obama being, I think he was a second director to a movie on Netflix that was about civil war. And that, as a Satanist, is him telling you this is what the future is going to be like. There will be civil war. And if some people are saved by that because they click on to what's happening in the demonic and satanic and devil worshipping karma world, that to them is enough for them. Because even in Satanism, it's not just about killing everybody. They have to warn you. But even if they subliminally warn you, that's enough karma, good karma, for them to come back round. And that's what these fuckers believe it or not. If you look into it, if you I articulate it a different way, but there's people out there that can articulate this a lot better. And if you say this to the average Joe, they're going to look at you if you got 10 heads. But I seen it with COVID-19, with the lead up to COVID-19 and the pandemic. I see it with the future. We're getting symbolism left, right, and center. So it could be a movie, it could be a magazine, it could be in a newspaper, but the symbolism is there. And to them, that's good karma for them. Okay, there's going to be maybe 20,000 people that see it. That's good enough for us, because at least we'll warn the public that this is going to happen, and that's going to bring us good karma back around. That's how these elitist, satanic bastards work.
Yeah. The occult stuff, I spent many years kind of researching into that stuff, and the different secret societies and the different covens, and Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan and so on. But you're dead right. There's like a more pop culture version of it. And the notion that Satanism is just about worshipping the ego is just a kind of a smokescreen to deflect away from the attention on worshipping an actual devil. And to tie it into my work as well, and how this all makes sense, is that, again, and I say this to people all the time, Christians have a massive advantage of understanding what's going on in the world, because they know about the concept of good and evil, and about God and the devil. What was the devil? The devil never, and this is a key point, the devil didn't say he was going to destroy humanity kind of outright. He's the tempter, the slanderer, the deceiver. And the devil, what he does is, the concept of free will, he wants to prove a point that humanity is no good, right? So again, for any non-Christian people, I always package this like, it doesn't matter whether or not they personally believe in the devil or not, or the God or not. It doesn't matter, because some people in the world do, and that makes them our enemy, essentially. So the brief of the devil is to use human beings to make them destroy themselves with their own free will choices. So when I see here abortion, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. It's brainwashing people in the way to fulfill Satan's agenda by destroying themselves. So when you have, and another one, by the way, while we're on the subject, is, I'm sure you've heard the feminist propaganda of young females walking around saying, how they justify an abortion is, it's a blob of cells, right? So there's that anti-humanity, satanic thing again, that we are nothing. We're like germs, pretty much, another satanic alarm bell there. We're not just a blob of cells. The fact that we all started off like the 23 pairs of chromosomes. We all started off like that DNA material from the mother and father, and we developed into a child and an adult who can have these conversations. So it's the miracle of life, pretty much. But the indoctrination, the satanic undertones, the Marxism needs to convince people that we're nothing and worthless. And it's a very effective system. And again, it's the manipulation of free will, which is the essentially what Satanism is. It's about making humanity prove Satan's point, that we are worthless and that we're going to destroy ourselves with our own egos and our own ignorance, and that we've forgotten about objective morality, truth, love, the wonder of creation, etc., etc. And we were talking about the say Hollywood and people involved in satanic worship. As we know that they're whores for any sort of degeneracy, essentially, and nothing should surprise us about them. And again, this is a whole part of the world that people can't see, that there's this stuff going on in the background that goes way back into history, and it's not really for public consumption. Therefore, it goes over people's heads, and they would find this stuff a lot far-fetched, even though the evidence is right in front of them. So it all connects in together, and I think it's important to mention it for sure.
Yeah, I want to move on to the climate change stuff, but just on abortion there, just to end on not end the discussion, but just to end that segment, and then to move on just to climate change. The climate change will be the last thing we're speaking about. But on abortion, it's the most, I understand if a woman is raped, she should have that access. Even as a Christian, I'll put my beliefs to the side and go, look, that woman should have that for her, that option, if she wants to do that, right? If a child is, that a child is raped, which is all rape, by the way, it doesn't matter if the child consents, it's still rape, it's statutory rape, right? So it all comes under rape to me. If the child is raped, then yes, that option should be there for the child to abort the child. And even though that eats me up because that's a life, but I understand that it could have severe ramifications for the mother. If the mother's life's put in danger, yes. But we're not seeing this now. We're seeing abortion being used as a form of contraception. Well, I can have sex with whoever I want, and I can have an abortion and just get rid of this lump of cells. Well, I catch these radical feminists out all the time, and they never want to answer this question. These radical leftists will say to me, oh, we found life on Mars, microbial life on Mars. But see the lump of cells that I aborted the other day? That isn't life. So which one is it then, radical feminist? Is that life on Mars, or is that just a clump of cells, microbial cells? Or the actual life that's in your body that you just aborted, is that life? Because they don't want to, they follow the science. Well, if we're going to follow the science, I would say that that's life inside your body, and you now have just murdered a baby because you find it okay to use this thing, abortion, as a form of contraception. You are a murderer. If your life isn't at risk, and you're not a child, and you're not a rape victim, my question to women is that use abortion, or my statement to women would be that use abortion, is that you're a murderer, and you're no better than a serial killer, and you're working for the devil. Close your legs and stop having sex then. Or tell the man to put on a condom if you're living that life. Don't be killing an innocent baby that could have came in here and contributed better to this society than you. That's my statement to them. But my statement that's not directed at rape victims, women that need that for health reasons, or children. But there's 10,000 babies last year were not born because of abortion in the small island of Era. That's 400 classrooms. 42,000 children aborted, murdered since 2018. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's all women that needed it because a lot of those are rape victims and a lot of those women would have died. Shite. Absolute shite. On the island of Era, where there's 5 million, 7 million people or something, if you include the north, you're trying to tell me that the 42,000 women that were going to die on this island needed an abortion? Probably 10,000 of them. We don't live in the United States of America. The rest of it was being used as a form of contraception, because that ability was there for them, that they could go out and murder that baby if they wanted to, because it was promoted in the satanic society that we live in. So, you know, for me, I can't agree with that. I swear to God, I mean, there needs to be strict rules around abortion. But we know, and I just need to say this, you know, on my Holden official channel that got taken down, I looked into a lot of the abortion clinics. These abortion clinics, especially in the United States of America and here too, are all owned by Satanists. When I say Satanist, if you look at the source, there was one abortion clinic in the United States of America that when you went into the abortion center where they actually done the abortion, there was a pentagram on the ground, and the abortionist would accept money for people to come in and watch. And there was one Satanist, I'm not going to get into it too much to make a long story short, witnessed the killing of thousands of children. And he was a full-blown devil worshipper. And this guy, all these children were murdered for Satan. So, you know, I can't condone it. If it's not to save a life, if it's not for a rape victim, if it's not for those things, then you're just murdering babies for the sake of it. And that to me is, you're murdering the pure. So to move into it now.
Can I just add a little point to what you said?
Yeah, work away, man.
Just to kind of add into link to what we were saying as well, is that, you know, that obviously feminism is what's changed the status in abortion in the last few decades. And there's been, your stats were brilliant for Ireland, of course, and spot on. And there's been over 60 million abortions in America since the 70s or whatever. So, you know, and obviously it correlates with the feminist movement. So back to the Satanism thing again, feminist brainwashing has convinced females that they would be happier not to have a child. And we know from the stats that the majority of them are social abortions. So like you were saying, the mother and child is perfectly healthy. They just don't want the kids. And this is when we already have problems with low birth rates. But what it's done is it's brainwashed females into thinking that their personal life satisfaction and how much pleasure they get from life is more important than the duty they have to produce children at some stage of their lives, you know? So that's what it's done. The brainwashing has convinced females that this is socially acceptable. So I put the blame for those abortion figures squarely on the feminist movement in Ireland, and there are other, you know, Marxist enablers in the country as well. And again, it's about the ego, using people's egos, removing their conscience from them to get them to commit these evil acts. So it's, you know, absolutely despicable.
Oh man, you know, it's a topic that I don't like speaking about, but I do speak about it because it makes me so angry. And obviously you're met with the sort of the normal, oh, you're a misogynist, leave women alone, our body, our choice. Listen, fuck off. Would you fuck off and do one, you murdering piece of shit. You're murdering babies. Close your legs and stop having sex with men and murdering babies. And if you are a rape victim, I sympathize with you. That option should be there for you. If your life depends on it, that option should be there for you. If you're a child and you know you're raped, that option should be there for you. That to me should be there for those three cases. But for anything else, no. Anything else out of the question, because we're talking about life here. So we'll move on to the climate thing now. Climate change, we all know it's a load of shit. It's been the coldest June that I've ever, the heating was on in June. It's a bit warm now in July. It's a bit sticky outside, but I remember May was scorching hot. I always had a tan. I couldn't get a tan this year. We had a week of hot weather. As I say, it's a bit sticky now. It's a bit humid, but nothing out of the ordinary. Why have they created the scam of climate change? Where does that come into the Marxist, globalist, communistic agenda?
Well, first and foremost, it's a massive economic attack on the West, and the Marxists, either deliberately or accidentally through their own clumsiness, are trying out socialism. They always tend to destroy economic prosperity. And the climate change movement, as we've seen, again, this is might take us into a tangent, but it clearly doesn't apply to the old communist countries like Russia, China, North Korea, etc. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But basically, like I was saying before in our correspondence, this is like a Marxist conspiracy theory, right? That the planet's being oppressed and the human beings are oppressing it. And unless we stop oppressing the poor planet with all this horrible CO2, which is the gas of life, by the way, unless we stop doing that, the planet's going to explode, or we're all going to die, or the weather's going to go up and down all over the place and go sideways, right? So it's based on this notion, again, which is the catalyst that produces the revolution. So it's the problem, reaction, solution thing people talk about, the Hegelian dialect of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? And so it's like, it produces a result that people think we need to go green, we need to start using renewables, which we end up blowing loads and loads of money trying to chase this mirage of reducing CO2 levels, that utopia is just around the corner. It's always the same with Marxist revolution. Utopia is just around the corner. We just need to go a bit further and we'll get there. So we need to invest another 5 trillion or 5 billion in these wind farms or in these solar panels, et cetera, and it bleeds the West economically. So that's the first aspect of it that's definitely Marxist in nature. And like I was saying as well, China aren't playing this game. They're throwing up nuclear power plants. They're throwing up coal-fired power plants. They're building our infrastructure. They're using slave labor. They're the ones producing the electric cars, et cetera, et cetera. So people can join the dots. They're actually profiting off the green movement, whereas they're not playing the game themselves. And it's allowed these countries to shoot up in their economic strength while the West is literally bankrupting itself. So that's the first aspect that makes it Marxist. The second one is that it's part of the whole one world government agenda. So the Marxists have been telling us for decades and decades that they want to build a world socialist federation. That's why the United Nations was created. That's why they created all the first internationals, or the second and third internationals. That's why they had these international organizations and these global initiatives. So the climate change movement, I think it was through, I interviewed someone on this years ago. He was talking about the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris, or the Copenhagen Accord and the Paris Agreement and the World Summits and so on, and Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. They're all about control and trying to, the climate change movement, again, is not about helping the planet or anything benevolent. It's about controlling what we eat, controlling how we live, whether or not we can, what kind of car we can drive, et cetera, et cetera. And we've seen how they've tied it in with, say, you see how the vegan movement seemed to be separate, but now they're tying the vegan movement into the climate change thing. Now they're trying to tell Irish farmers and other European farmers how they're supposed to farm, that the cows are bad for the atmosphere. We need to start killing all the cows and stuff. It's mental. Like, the connections are endless here. But again, it's more revolutionary bullshit based on a lie, and it's going to produce nothing but destruction. And I mean, it's hilarious. I put it in the book. I put a table of all the different Marxist agendas according to the oppressor and oppressed principle. And like, that's the funniest one. Think of the arrogance of these people. They think we're oppressing an entire planet, and the planet's the poor victim. It's ridiculous.
Just have to say, just to get this in here, there's 113 people watching on X. If you want to join in a live chat, jump over to Rumble, hold an official, capital H, capital O, all one word. If you don't have the Rumble app, you can download it from the Play Store, or you can just type in Rumble app onto Google, or you can do that via your browser. I would suggest you do that if you're a watcher of good content on YouTube, except Rumble is total 100% freedom of speech. That's why me and Amit can have this conversation. I've got more viewers over on my X than I do on Rumble here. So anybody on X, make sure you jump over to Rumble. And on Rumble, in the description, you can get the links to Amit's book and where Amit's socials are. So the link for his X, formerly known as Twitter, is in the Rumble description. His YouTube channel is in the description, the link for that. And where you can buy his book is in the description. And I would suggest everything we've spoke about here tonight is in his book, hence why Amit is on breaking down this. But the climate change thing, yes, for me, to wrap this up, because we don't want to be doing this too long for audience retention. The communist sort of where they wanted to go, the end result is centralized control of your food, centralized control of your consciousness via pharmaceuticals and TV, centralized control of your movement via electric cars, and that ties in with the climate thing, right? The 15-minute cities, you do not need to walk any more than 15 minutes. This is a one world government communistic plan. This isn't a conspiracy theory. What Amit has been speaking about tonight is basically all a fact, obviously with our opinions put into it too. But if you want to fight against this, you must be non-compliant. You do not comply. It starts off very small. You boycott products. You boycott McDonald's. Stop going to the McDonald's. You boycott the government. Stop paying your TV license. Stop watching TV so you don't need a TV license. These are the things that's going to hurt them. Hit them where it hurts. If there's a pandemic, don't wear your mask. Be non-compliant. Hang it over your ear. Hang it down your chin. Make it hard for them to do this. Refuse to shut down your business. Pay with things in cash. Eat clean food. Drink lots of water. Work out. Believe in Jesus Christ and come back to Christianity. These things are going to help society. This is how you do not comply to the devil. And for me, with every podcast that I do, regardless of what platform that, I've been deplatformed on every fucking platform there is, but it's for a reason. And these are the reasons. I always like to give a way out for people, because a lot of people watch this content, Emmett, and it messes with their mental health. I can tell you how to make your mental health better. Do everything that I've just said, and your mental health will be way better than everybody else's. And you will also radiate that positivity out to everybody, and that will have a positive effect. So, Amit, is there anything you would like to say before in the conversation?
It's been great, Ron, and thanks for everything we've talked about. It's been a great discussion, and to tie into what's happening, and we can probably do this in another chat sometime. One of the big effects of Marxism that people don't notice is that it's the antithesis to patriotism or healthy nationalism. And what I argue in the book is that if people want to get any freedom from this globalist monster, we need to detox our societies of all kinds of Marxism all the way across the board, even the bits that people like. For example, there's plenty of, say, for example, people in Ireland who talk about nationalism and patriotism, but they like socialist ideas. Or there's others, say, women who want their country to be free, but they also like feminism or veganism or something. I'm like, no, it all has to go in the trash. Throw it all in the trash, and then nationalism will start to rise. And that's what's going to stop this globalist monster, is when we have more sovereignty in our countries. So that's what the book is designed to do, is to just highlight how bad Marxism is across the board, why we should reject it, and the positive results if we manage to do that.
And as I stated, you can buy the book in the description of this. The link for that is in the description of this Rumble Live. It isn't put on to X. I will put the link on X in the comment section of this live too. So make sure if you're watching on X and you want to buy the book, and I highly suggest you do, support your local intellectual that's out here doing the Lord's work, breaking down this for you, so you don't have to think about it. You can just read this book and you can understand. So if you want that book, it's in the description. I suggest you go over and buy that. And you want to go follow Emmett on any other social media platform like Rumble, sorry, not Rumble, if you X and YouTube. Those links are in the description of this Rumble Live also, so head over and follow them there. That is the end of the podcast, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks for the audience on X, thanks for the audience on Rumble, but most of all, Emmett, thank you very much for your knowledge and for your book and for your experiences, and hopefully you come back on sometime.
Thanks very much, Ron. It's been great, and definitely we'll have a chat again sometime.
That's it, folks. Peace out.